Hey, welcome to the Driven to Compete channel. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, I highly recommend you check out some of the other videos on the channel. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button along with the bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. With that said, today's project is a carb project on my 67 Firebird convertible. So here's the deal. I already started the project, and I should have shot some video, but I didn't. I was in a hurry and I didn't take the time to do it. So it's already kind of in a stage. But what we did was I had a. Let me turn the light on here for you so you guys can actually see a little better. Okay, so I had a Holley Street Avenger carburetor on here, 600. I think it's 670, and you know, I had it all hooked up here, and over the years I had it dyno tuned, and I've had problems with it from the start. It's about 12 years ago I put it on the car. So what I ended up doing was taking the carb off the car. Originally it looked like this when I first put it on the car. Of course it looked like it was 100 years old when I took it off, and I had issues where I'm going to put up some photos as well, but these are examples of how brittle the castings had come, that it just started to fall apart. So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to put some photos up. In the photos you're going to see some circles on just to kind of like highlight what you're actually seeing from a damage standpoint on the casting. Okay, so the pictures kind of speak for themselves. So what I did was I reached out to Holley carburetors. You know, typically these guys have a 1-year warranty that they put on their carbs, but I reached out to them and I started explaining that I felt the casting were falling apart. It was very brittle. It was all kinds of characteristics. It was like there was a metallology issue with it kind of separating, and they thought I was kind of crazy. So I sent 20 some photos, and he said, "Yeah, we want you to bag it and box it up and send it back to us, please, and we want to do further inspection." So I did that. I got a delivery notification that it was delivered on Monday at, like, I don't know, 1:30 in the afternoon. Within an hour, Holley called me and said, "Hey, yeah, we are so sorry that our product failed. We're going to replace it free of charge. You'll have something within the next couple days." Sure enough, 4 days later, this box was on my porch. I opened it up, and there it is, new Street Avenger. And you know, I really can't say enough. I appreciate their willingness to work with me, and it's a completely new carburetor. You can see here, came with everything I needed, springs, you know, everything there. I had already removed a lot of the stuff off my original, and what I did was, because I recommend anybody with a carbed car, you know, and have it tuned. Take it to someplace where you can put on a dyno and you have a guy that really knows what he's doing. That's what I did here. So they had changed out my jets. So what I did was I started soaking my jets. I have them marked, the R for rears. I took them out. I started soaking them in cleaner. The cleaner is somewhat discolored. Let me see if I can get you the, there you go. It is somewhat discolored, and there's particles floating in it. And I can see. So what I'm going to do now that they're clean, I'm going to start taking the carburetor apart. This is actually how the carb sits when it's installed on the car. So this would be the front bowl, this would be the back bowl. You know, there's some basics to how to set these guys up. But the first thing I'm going to do is take the bowls off. I'm going to go ahead and put my jets that are soaking in the carburetor, and then I'll show you the next step to getting it back together. So I removed my jets, and boy, did that make a difference. They're clean. I can actually read the number. There's 78s that are in it, and I can't speak to whether they're actual 78s or if he ended up drilling them out a little larger, but I will say this. It is American made, so it's a standard 5/16. You just put that on there. You pull these 4 bolts out, and you can remove the bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and do that so I can show you the next step. So I've gone ahead and I've removed it, and a couple things I want to point out to you. When you're taking these apart, they come with reusable gaskets. So you want to be careful when you're taking it apart. And I do expect it to stick. So, you have to use a little force to get it to come apart, but then it'll come apart. And, I recommend you just be careful so you don't tear the gasket in case it's sticking or whatever. And, this is what it looks like on the inside. And a couple observations that I want to point out that's different. On my carb, these were threaded. You had an O-ring, and you threaded in a clear sight plug. Now they've made it where they're kind of permanent. So I kind of like that because the old style leaked. These don't look like they're going to leak. I'm kind of happy to see that because you need to be able to see in there to adjust your floats, which we'll talk about later in the video. So for right now, and while I'm thinking about it, do you see these tabs right here? Yeah, that's where these guys were that just started falling off the old carburetor, just to give you an idea of how brittle that was. So this is your, these are your rear main jets, okay? And this is your metering block. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch those out and, put it back together. Okay, so you need to use a nice flat screwdriver and you can take the jets out. They're grooved on purpose to do that. So I took them out, and what they send you factory are 68s. And as you can see, mine are 78s. So if you look, there's a significant difference right there in the amount of fuel those jets are going to feed the carburetor. So that's why it's important that you have somebody tune the car on a dyno, or somebody who has the right vacuum gauge and everything else that can really be able to know what your air to fuel is and how much fuel you need throughout your curve and so on. But anyway, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put these jets back in using a straight screwdriver, and I'll reassemble the bowl, and then we'll get to the next step. Move the front bowl. I pulled the front jets out, and as you can see, again, because I had my car tuned, I'm going to try to get you so you can see the jets are slightly different on the front versus the back again. Now I know Holley prides themselves in saying that these carbs are pretty close to where they need to be, but I have to tell you that that's not always the case. That sometimes a car could require more fuel than what the jets are from the factory. So again, I highly recommend that you seek tuning help when you're putting something like this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put these in here. Before I put this on the car, I thought I'd give you guys a quick show. So this is your accelerator pump, and I just wanted to share that because these are different sizes as well. Again, if you go on Holley's website, they really will give you some really up-to-date information. You can upsize these and change these. The gaskets are available. All the parts are available. Metering blocks, replacement fuel bowls, all the different size jets. This is what they call a power valve. That's available for replacement. I mean, there's all the parts are on there. This is the electric clutch, or choke, excuse me. This operates the choke, and then this controls the secondaries and how fast they open for the carburetor. So choke, secondaries. Again, we'll go through some of that here, but I just thought while I had it apart here for a second, and you can easily see this, I'd show you what that is. Bowls are on. Listen, when you're tightening these, I like to hand tighten everything, and then I like to go in a pattern where I'm crisscrossed in here. It's kind of like when you're doing your lug nuts on your car. And again, I'm not doing a torque spec on these. I'm going to where I know they're snug, and I can tell that they're where I want it to be. And then from there, I'm just moving on to the next step. So before we move on any further, when they shipped this had some junk inside from debris. So I'm going to blow all that out first. So I'm not putting that down inside my intake. So I'm going to go ahead and blow some of that dirt out. I know it's hard for you to be able to see, but trust me, there's some stuff here and there inside the carb. So I'm just going to hit it with some compressed air. I want to note, when you're putting this front bowl back on, you want to make sure that you bring this down, and you make sure that this is, this is on a spring here. You want to make sure that that's put back together that way. If not, what will happen is this will be down, will be on top of that, and then it won't work properly. So you want to have this under pressure, as you can see here. So just want to make sure I pointed that out as well. Holley sends a nice little instruction booklet. It says installation, tuning, and adjustment manual with it. And I will tell you there's table contents. And they talk about how to remove the air cleaners, some basics, if you're running a Ford or Chrysler application, blah, 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 how to install it. You know, stuff that we're going to go over that you don't have to really worry about, but it does talk about electric choke, vacuum secondaries, gives you all layout of everything, which is nice, your sight bowls. By the way, a properly adjusted fuel should be about halfway in the center of both of these for your floats. Just as a rule of thumb, just when you get, while the car is running, of course, not while it's parked. So, you know, here they go down through, they give you a fuel line if you want to hook up fuel line. I have a little bit different setup that we'll go over. Talk to you about how to adjust the choke, and basically before the car is running, we're gonna you loosen these screws up here, and this will rotate, and it will determine what you want to do is you want to look for your choke to be closed fully or open, and you want to back it to where it's you know, there's an adjustment to it. It's not rocket science. We'll go over that here in a minute as well. But you know, then they talk about there's some notes in here. Listen, I don't do this that often, so you know, I grew up around carbs, but they talk about, you know, things that you might, you know, like idle mixtures and little hints on how to do that, and things you might want to look at there, and you know, idle speeds and all this other stuff. And they tell you, you know, they remind you about how to adjust the float levels and vacuum operated secondaries and all that. And I wanted to cover that because I opened this up and they give you different springs. And basically what they do is they give you a standard spring that they say should meet pretty much all applications. And what these springs do is they control when your secondaries open. Softer spring, secondaries open sooner. Heavier spring with the black, secondaries open. It takes longer for them to open. Okay, so they say in theory, heavier cars you want that heavier spring for them, or if you're looking for increased fuel economy, so this will delay when your secondaries come in. Okay, so if you've ever ridden in a carb car where they get in it, you're full throttle, and then the car just kind of like, you can feel the secondaries open up, it throws you back and see a little bit. That's because it's the delayed opening of the secondaries, so a heavier spring. Now what they did when they tuned mine at the carb, Brett Duncan tuned my car, and I got to tell you, I always call him the carb god because I really admire Brett for his experience. But he wasn't happy. He was fine tuning, so he trimmed my spring on the standard. And I think the idea was it would allow my secondaries to open sooner, but not as early as using the really soft spring, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this back in the car because that's what worked for me on my original setup. So to do so, all I'm going to do is you pull two screws off here and the plunger comes out, and excuse me here, trying to hold the phone, the camera. You just put that on the bottom just like that, and you just set it back inside. You can see the inside there. Oh, there's an O-ring, by the way. You want to make sure you don't drop that. I'm going to put that right back on top there, so the O-ring's good to go. And basically, you just set this guy back, and there you go. And I'm just going to put the screws back in it. And that will control my secondaries and how soon they open. So the carb's still off the car. I want to go over a couple things with you. This screw here adjusts your idle when the car is hot, okay? But when the car is cold, right, all your choke does is helps to richen the car up so it has more fuel. But how do you control the idle? Well, right there it is. There's an adjustment screw there, and it is a pain in the butt. I'm not going to kid you, to get to once it's carburetor's on the car. Hopefully I won't have to adjust that so that the car will idle at and stay running when the choke is on. But I just wanted to go over that. Anything we can do prep wise, all the other fine adjustments need to be done on the car once the carburetor is installed. Before we can do that, we have to go over here and you want to make sure your area is prepped. Now what I've done is I've gone ahead and I put some rags inside my intake because I do have some remaining content here from my previous gasket. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch hands here because I'm a right-handed person, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to scrape this off. Now, I will say this, don't panic if you get a little bit, make a little bit of a mess, and I'll tell you why here, because I use a shop vac for everything in the garage. I think it's one of my best friends here, so I'm going to go ahead and I apologize, I moved my finger there, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean all this up, get it clean, and then I'm going to take the vacuum and I'm going to go over all this and clean it up. And while I have the space to work, I'm probably going to clean up this intake here because there's some staining from fuel that was leaking and some other things. So I'm going to take my time here. I'm going to clean it up a little bit just because I take pride in the way the car looks. So when I come back, I'll have it prepped and ready to set the carburetor on. I've got my gasket there. Now they give you a single layer gasket. I chose to go with a little thicker one for myself, but it's pretty much wiped down, ready to go. So I'm going to set the carb on. Now I will say this, they give you studs for in your intake, okay, that you can put in and you throw them in, and then you set your carb down on the studs, and then you screw in, you run a nut down on top. I chose to not go that route. I run a bolt down through into my intake. I know that that's not factory or how they did it back in the day, but that's just my preferred preference because I don't care what you do here. These threaded inserts always come loose, so while you're trying to tighten it down to get that extra half a turn on the nut, it turns the threads instead and it backs out. So they give you something that's threaded that you would put down in here that would stick out, and then you would put a nut on the top and tighten down. Okay, now that is actually the rod for the air cleaner that goes up here. Okay, but I wanted to give you an idea of what I was referring to. What I'm going with is I prefer to go this route and put that in there and just start it. And then they tell you, just like I talk about tightening when in doubt, always tighten things down. Like you're doing your lug nuts on your car where you're going in a star pattern. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go back to the corner back here. I'm going to probably come up here and then go back there to the back corner and tighten these up. They don't have to be super tight. Again, you want to go where they're nice and snug by hand. You don't have to get a ratchet on them and really crank on them. That's not needed at all. So I'm going to go ahead. I'll tighten down the carburetor. And I'll go ahead and I'll finish screwing in the stud for the air cleaner nut. And then we'll start hooking up the fuel lines here. As you can see, they're pretty simple. And I've got that right there. We've got to hook up a couple hoses here. But again, nothing major. Knock it out here in just a few minutes. And again, I appreciate your patience while you're watching the video. Yeah, how tight you want these. I tightened these with and snugged them up. And I'm just going to give them like a quarter turn. I'm going to come over here. I started in the back corner back here. I went to this corner. I'm going to come over here now. I'm going to go ahead and again, that one's a little looser. I'm going to give it maybe a half a turn. Go back here to the back. And it got snug. You can feel it. I know it's good. But again, I'm going to go over everything. That's nice and tight. Go back here to where I started. That's got a little bit of adjustment needed. And that's good and snug. I feel confident that that's not going to leak. You're not going to have any issues. So I've gone ahead. I've tightened down my carburetor. As you know, I've gone ahead. I've hooked my fuel up. Now I will give you a piece of advice. On the new carb here, these seemed very tight, so I could go ahead and I could tighten my dual feed metal line in and got it very tight without this moving at all. But if you would happen to have where my finger's at here, it would start to turn. You would have to put a wrench on that to hold that in place, so that when you have a wrench on this at the same time and you're tightening, that's not moving. So it's allowing you to get that extra quarter turn or whatever you need. I would say this: if you're going to have an issue with leaking fuel, this is where it's going to happen, front and rear locations. I've gone ahead and I've hooked up my vacuum that goes from the brake booster into the lower back of the carburetor back here. I've gone ahead, I've hooked up my electric choke, and I had taken pictures previously of where my choke was set at. So let me readjust here. So I loosened up these screws. There's 3 of them. There's one down below here, and it lets you turn this. So I went ahead and I adjusted it. I came down to where I hit the bump stop. It won't let me go any further. Okay, and that's where I adjusted, because that's where it was at before. Now, if I have issues where the car doesn't want to start with the choke because this isn't closing, under correct, let me just make sure we have everything here. Let me see here. Okay, so typically what would happen is this would go closed, and it would allow you to, of course, choke the car. Now the car, it is warm out, and I was throwing some heat to this choke, so the choke's got a little heat in it from power to it while I was playing around here. So I went ahead and I just adjusted it where my old carb was set at. I may have to tweak that. I may have to loosen this back up and turn this. Ultimately, you want it so this is closed and ready to open. So again, I may not have it adjusted correctly, but I went ahead and I put it where my old carburetor was at. I still need to finish tightening this guy in so that it stays in and lets me tighten down my air cleaner. I'm going to go in till I can't see the gold and the threads anymore. That means that that's how far in it was the last time. And then I should be ready at this point to put a little fuel in here, because you got to remember the bowls are empty. So I'm going to put some fuel in the carb, try to get it to help it start, so that it can draw fuel up too as well while it's going. And we're going to see if we can't check the and adjust the floats in the bowls, and then we're going to start working on the air, the fuel mixtures, and to go from there. Last thing too, you have on the other side here, you have your throttle. So what I did was I ran a throttle rod. I run a different setup. I've seen guys run springs that connected down here over. I have a fairly decent stiff spring that I'm just running to a point on the intake here, and it gives me just the right amount of pedal firmness. I like it. I have the rod here. So what I did was I put it through. I put some washers for spacers, and then I fished up through the hole there. And I recommend you come from the bottom up. I fished through a cotter pin, and I bent it out, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snip these off. Well, what's nice is when it comes time to remove this, right, you can easily grab a pair of pliers and get on each side of each end, bend it, right, and push it down through for ease of access. So that's just a little hint. I went ahead and I trimmed that up. As you can see, that's clean. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of fuel down in. And again, I'm not putting a lot in, and I'm just trying to get some fuel in there so that when it's time to start, hopefully till it burns off with a little bit of fuel I just put in there, it will have pumped through the fuel pump and build up and filled the bowls here. So let's give this thing a try and see where we get. She's alive. Okay, so here's where we're at. She's idling. She's obviously needs some adjustments made. I'm going to go ahead. The back float you can see is half full. The front is very much full. So I know right now I'm going to have to adjust my floats. Most likely, when it's running, I'll have to check it. Most likely, the back's going to be fine, but the front's going to need to be adjusted. And it did pop a little bit through the carburetor, so I have no doubt that I'm going to have to adjust air to fuel. But I liked where it was at. Idle's going to have to come up as well. But again, it's a start. What I think I need to do is I need to back this old girl out of the garage so that I don't smell the place up. I don't know if you can see, there's a little bit of a haze. I will say this, you you know, this is a lot of trial and error, and if you've never done this before, don't be afraid to try it. I've turned the idle up a little bit. First, I like to shake the cam in it. Sounds pretty good. Let me go around back here. Idling good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mess around with my air to fuel. I got a straight Phillips here. I'm going to go ahead and you hear it speeding up. I'm going to go down until I choke it off. There it's responding. So it's closed the whole way. Right there, I believe is correct. Let's check it back here. Closed, you can hear it. Pretty close to where Holley had it to begin with. That sounds pretty good there. I like that. Let's go around the other side. Let's try it here too. Okay. Huh. So I closed that off. There it's responding. So I'm going to go back to there. And then we're going to go back here yet. And adjust that final one back there. And I apologize, it's hard trying to do all this and give you a perfect shot. We're back. I'm outside. I've been playing with the car a little bit, and I wanted to show you, there's the fuel level. Now, I know you're supposed to check these when the car's running, but I went ahead and I did adjust them. That looks a little high right now, but when the car's running, it actually is right where it needs to be at. So if you want to adjust your floats, I'm going to tell you to be careful. They give you a paper gasket, which is kind of crappy. I went ahead and I put an O-ring in because it tore and started to leak. But you have a lock. You have a lock screw on the top that you loosen, and then you can turn the nut with a wrench. Clockwise will raise your float level. Counterclockwise will lower your float level down. You can do it a couple different ways. You can make small increment changes while the car's turned off, start the car again, and then check it. I do recommend that you rev it once or twice. By revving it up while the car is running, as you're making adjustments to your fuel levels here in your floats, right, and your bowls, it lets it like pull fuel out and recalibrate or readjust itself. So like I said, you turn this clockwise, it raises the level of the fuel, okay? You turn it counterclockwise, it lowers it. Now on your secondaries, you want to do this. The fun one, you can turn the car off, make it like small adjustments, tighten the lock. You know, you can lock it back down with the screw, start it back up, and you can check your float levels that way. Back here though, you know, they tell you need to do it while the car is running. I will tell you this, that the adjustment's a lot finer back here, seem to be. So I think I've got them dialed in. So my grandfather was in the business for, you know, many years, and he always taught me, when you're adjusting air to fuel, you back them the whole way down and you bring them up until the car starts to idle smoothly and at a solid pace. When you stop hearing the idle change, then you go back a quarter of a turn. Now Holley's saying put a vacuum gauge on the port on the carb and adjust it till you have the highest vacuum you can possibly get with a smooth idle. So I'm going to try it this way. I'm not going to do it while I'm videoing because I don't have enough hands free to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on this a while, and I'm going to give you my opinion of how that turned out. Things on, floats are adjusted. I did have to make a trip to Pep Boys to get new washers. They give you a paper gasket, which basically is good for 1 or 2 adjustments. So I went and got a kit from Pep Boys with some nylon washers to allow me to make the adjustments to that. I used my vacuum gauge. I did put it on the port down here. There's 2 ports, and so the smaller port there, you can pull that plug off. You can plug your vacuum into it, and they tell you to start it, turn the idle up, and Holley wants you to close all your jets. Of course, the car does not want to stay running, and then they tell you to start making adjustments, quarter turn each corner. I actually did a half a turn each corner. With the idle turned up, I was able to maximize. They tell you to keep making adjustments until you stop building vacuum. And so I would say the car was probably idling, I don't know, 1200 to 1500 RPM today, somewhere in that ballpark, while I was making the adjustments, and I was pulling 18, 18 on vacuum. I made some adjustments, turned the idle down. I still wasn't quite, frankly, wasn't quite happy. Went back to tuning it by ear a little bit here. Jimmy's with me. He's going to start it up. I'm going to let you hear it.
Rev it till she pops.
Rev it till she pops. Yeah, that's really good. Holley 670 Street Avenger carb replacement. You probably don't even have to pump it. Just bump the key. Okay. Now I can turn the idle up, but the second you bump it, it wants to idle nice. Hit it a couple times, Jimmer. So when we do that, it comes right down, it idles nice. The car's down. Okay. So there you have it. Let me turn this around. Listen, I want to thank you for hanging out for the entire video. This isn't rocket science. Unfortunately, it's becoming a forgotten art form. Kids today are dealing with fuel injection or going up for fuel injection, and they just don't know much about carburation. It's been a learning curve for me as well, because I forgot a lot, but it was kind of cool to be out in the garage working on this old girl again. As you can see, she's back together, ready to be driven. This was our other project, which will be a video uploaded about that. We put carbs on this. We're still kind of fine-tuning it. But it's been a busy weekend of carburation. How about it, Jimmy?
Carburetor weekend.
Carburetor weekend. Wow. Anyway, listen. As always, I love comments, questions. Hit me up. Thanks for watching. And keep checking back. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you can stay up to date on the latest videos. Say
Lots more cool stuff to come, so subscribe.
Yep. Boosted Tag knows it all. Let me tell you, nobody knows carburation like Jimmy knows carburation. Have a great day.